Hey guys, this is Amir from AMW Films here, sharing with you a proxy comparison workflow between Final Cut Pro X and Premiere Pro. This is not a comparison video about which one is better. This is just the pros and cons and issues you may run into. I specialize in Final Cut Pro and I'm learning more about Premiere. But before I get into the actual workflow, I want to show you why Proxy. One of the first ones that I love is that it extends the life of your computer that has dated specs. So if you have an older computer and you're working with either 4K footage or any footage that's a high res, basically Proxy adds more mileage to your computer. Another one is the ability to start editing quicker and more efficiently. The best thing about Proxy workflow is that since you're dealing with a smaller file size, you're dealing with low resolutions, the computer is able to read those files much easier, and you're able to start editing on the fly much faster. The next benefit is that you're allowed to be mobile. So let's say that you have a project that has 10 gigs of footage or more. When you have Proxy footage, it's either half or a quarter to the size of the total amount of footage that you have. You don't need to have the high-res files with you in order to create the edit. And then when you're done, you just relink the footage, and I'll show you all that later. Now let's get into it. I'm gonna start with Final Cut Pro X first because the Proxy workflow is not that complicated. It's one of the easiest workflows I've ever seen when it comes down to doing proxies. What I want to do is get you guys ready for like either the worst case scenario, which is you're using footage that's super high res and very heavy. So we're actually gonna start with red footage. But before I do that, I'm gonna tell you where I got the red footage from. So you could either follow along or you could practice on your own, which is really amazing. This is what I usually do before I do any type of edit that I don't know how to use the footage. I find a way to get the footage online, download it just to practice with it, just to see the kinks or work out any type of issues before we actually shoot the project. So first thing you do is go on Google, type in red footage download, you click on this link, this will open up. So you can just scroll down, you can just click on this one right here. I just picked this one because the megabyte size was small, but also it was 50 frames a second as well too. So after you click on download, you just gotta unzip it and then you're able to follow along. Now some of you follow along may or may not have the red plugin installed, and when you drag and drop your footage into Final Cut, it may not load. So the first thing you want to do is go back to Google, type in FCPX red plugin, click on this link right here, this will pop up. Once you download and install this, this will allow you to read red footage. Now we're back on Final Cut. I'm going to drag and drop the footage into the event right here. As you can see, the footage has loaded up. And you see how she's moving and jittering? Sometimes the footage glitches out. The computer can't really handle it, so it's not reading it well. And this is where Proxy comes in. So on Final Cut, all you do is you right click on transcode media, make sure Proxy is clicked, and then press OK. Up here, when you click on this button right here, it'll show you what's happening in the background, and it's letting you know that it's generating the proxy for you. Now, let's do the same thing on Premiere. I'm gonna open up and drag and drop my footage in. What you click on is the R3D file. Premiere reads these files natively. I'm not sure if you can hear it, but my computer is really revving up because this 8K footage is really taking a toll on the computer, but once the proxies are done, we'll be good to go. Now, in Premiere, when you double click on the footage, it pops up in the source window. I'm gonna click to play back. As you can see, it played a little bit, but then it got a little bit jittery. Once again, this is where Proxy comes in. Premiere's proxy workflow is a little bit different. What you do is you right click on the file, go to Proxy, then click on create proxies. Depending on what computer you have to create the proxies that's more optimal for your computer. Now this is the best settings that work for me when I'm using Windows. What I do is click on QuickTime, then I click on 1280 by 720 GoPro Cineform, and then what I do is I pick the location of where I want to have the files dropped. I create a folder so I'm able to find the proxies later. Now you click OK. You could check if it's proxied or not. What you do is you right click on metadata display, type in proxy, click on proxy. Then you can scroll over, but what I like to do is click in here and then press the tilde key. Then what you do is you scroll to the right. You can bring this over if you want. But as you can see, it says proxy attached. I'm gonna go to Final Cut and do the same thing and check on it. So what you do is click on the clip, then click on the inspector at the top right, click on the I button, scroll down, and as you can see, the proxy is there. Now to activate it on Final Cut, what you do is click on the view menu, then you click on proxy. The footage is read a little bit better than before. Now let's do the same thing with Premiere. The button is not there in Premiere sometimes, so what you do is you click on the button editor right here and add it in. And just hit OK. So I'm going to click on this in the source monitor. As you can see, the aspect ratio changed because it's now 720. But look at the playback. Let's see the file size of the actual proxy. Now the proxy for Premiere is 32.7 megabytes. Let's look at the one for Final Cut. The proxy size for Final Cut is 133.2 megabytes. That's what happens when you use Final Cut. You only have one click, one button. You're not able to customize the settings to make the proxy size even smaller to work better with your computer. I'm going to show you another benefit of doing proxies workflow inside of Premiere with on and offlining your footage. Now I'm going to put the actual proxy in first. And this is what I was talking about with being mobile. Your computer is just reading just this file alone, which is the proxy file. Say you want to get back to your original footage and edit. All you have to do is just right click here, go to proxy, now click reconnect full resolution media. Click attach. Then all you have to do is go to the file where the red raw file is at, hit OK, and it's going to attach the red footage. When you take off the proxy, but when you click on this, it's back now full res. And then when you click on this right here, you're back to the proxy. Another pro so far I see with the proxy workflow in Premiere is that I could still edit the red raw footage in its raw nature. So I'm going to drag this clip, create a sequence real quick, just so you can see it live. So I'm going to click right here on effects and controls, take off the proxy, and I'm going to change the ISO. As you can see, it updates in real time. It doesn't affect the proxy because the proxy wasn't created with those red footage settings inside of it. Now let's go back to the original state. Click on reload from RMD. Let's try to do the same thing on Final Cut Pro X. Let me just get this bottom area out, click on this right here, and then I'm gonna click on the footage again. Then as you can see, I still have the proxy and I still have the original footage, and when I click right here, I'm in the proxy view. But when I want to click on editing the raw footage, it says that I have to delete the proxy in order to edit the raw footage. So when I click on continue, you're gonna see this green dot disappear. As you see it disappeared, then I have to click up here, go to optimize original, and then now I'm able to do the same thing that I was doing before and change the ISO. So in order for me to get back my proxy, I have to regenerate it again. And when you're working on a time crunch, that can become a big hassle. So for Premiere Proxies workflow, the pros have the option to relink proxies created from in and outside sources. So you're able to get proxies either from on set from your shoot or get proxies from another friend that's working on a project with you, and you can use those proxies to work. You're also able to create proxies at different sizes. Also on top of that, you can create proxies based on different codecs. This works well, especially when you're working on different platforms. Now here's some of the cons. As you can see, when I created the proxies, Media Encoder popped up to create the proxies, or you need a third-party app to create the proxies. But then on top of that, you have to add in the cost of the third-party app to create your proxies for your workflow. So based on the budget, that could be an issue. Even though all of the pros allow you to do all those steps in different sizes and different codecs, that may become an issue if you don't know the step-by-step way to get the best proxies for your workflow. One of the biggest issues is not being able to ingest Apple ProRes proxies on Windows. You guys can work on the same project, But when it comes down to proxies, you guys have to use the same exact codec that works on both. So the person on Mac creates those proxies in Apple ProRes because he's using them and they're working fine, but once he sends it over to another editor who's working on Windows, those become a problem. They may not even import at all. Now let's go to Final Cut. Easy one-click option to create proxies. As you can see, once I right-clicked on the button, it said create proxies. I click on OK. Final Cut does everything for you. A big benefit is that those proxies were created internally inside of Final Cut. We didn't have to open up another app. We didn't have to download or use a third-party app to get the proxies. Everything was done all internally, so you could keep moving on with your project, organizing your footage, and let those proxy roll in the background. Now, one of the cons of Final Cut's proxy workflow is you can't customize the settings and make the proxy smaller. Whatever size you get is whatever size you get. As you can see, we had 32.7, and then on Final Cut it was over 100 megabytes, 133 megabytes. So it's like a big difference if you could have the ability to change your settings to get the file size of the proxies a bit smaller. Another con is that it's difficult to share your proxies because you have to make those proxies and then you have to send those proxies from the original library. There is a relink feature, but it's not as stable as the one in Premiere. One of the biggest cons I see is that when working with red footage or raw footage, you're not able to change raw settings unless you delete the proxies generated within that file. So that's just a quick rundown of just the proxies workflows, the pros and cons of it from Premiere and Final Cut. As you can see, they have pros and cons. You just gotta pick which one that works best for you. Hope that helped out, and hope you guys are having a great day.